Hello and welcome everyone. It's Suzanne here from the Project Manager Clinic. And again today we've got another Ask the Mentor session with Margaret DeSantis. And we've got another great one today, Margaret. We always do. Um, we've got some people on the line currently, which is also great. Thanks for joining us today. And hopefully you've been to the YouTube channel and you've seen the other Ask a Mentors that we've done. If not, the link is in the chat. Please go there and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. We'd love to see you there on the channel. So the Ask the Mentor sessions are where somebody sent us a question and they're usually pretty curly. But before we get into it, Margaret, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm super excited to go through this question today because it is very topical for project managers.
It is.
So,
Yes.
yeah, I would love the person that asked this question to be able to, get a chance to review the content that we put out today and
Yes.
see whether that actually answered their question.
Yes. And we actually, Margaret and myself, often get these questions. And then as we work through the process of answering we come up with a whole bunch of things, don't we, Margaret?
That's right.
We've learned ourselves just
That's
by going
right.
through it.
Exactly. And
Amazing.
sometimes it's not just for, it really helps you as a project manager, but it's also not just for you yourself in your work life, but it could also apply
Yeah,
to your personal life. And, I think anyone that is experiencing a lot of workload.
exactly. Now, what we've got here in the slides, and the slides will be available on the website later, so the link will be in the description of the YouTube when it goes up. Project management can be a grind. And it depends, I think, on how you're looking at it. You can be overwhelmed, stressed, and the finish line seems to get longer and further away. But what if we told you that there is a secret weapon, and part of that secret weapon is not going to be a surprise to you when you hear what we've got to say, and that's part of this Ask the Mentor, unfolding and unraveling these questions. Now, the person that actually sent this in is a finance person, and they've been taken from their finance role, which they're still trying to do, and they've been put into a project role. So you can imagine what it's like for them. They've got a few things to juggle, and potentially when I got this, it was August, so it was after the financial year. Okay, so let's dive in. Okay, Margaret?
Yeah, sure.
Now, would you like me to read this out, or would you like to read that question?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay.
Yeah.
So this person said, I'm closing out 2 jobs that are at the finish line and things are moving so fast I have hiccups due to my full attention being focused on one job at a time. I didn't write this, so that's really, really wild way of putting it. I know it sounds like I'm not capable, but I'm really not. And I'm not sure if they're saying I'm really not capable on these 2 projects or it's actually a mistake in how they've written the question. I just feel like I've inherited a shitstorm coming in the last 20% of a job with no prior knowledge as to how my current company closes out a job. I get told things once and I'm expected to remember, which is fair but still pretty hard, especially when things are moving at 100 miles an hour and everything is an emergency. Any tips? Okay, so tips are going to be welcome.
That's right.
Okay, next slide, Margaret. Sorry, I've got about 3 screens happening here, so 1 second. Okay. Right, the art of delegation. The project managers manage, don't they? I'm always talking about this.
Right. So I know that this is put together by both of us, the whole slide pack. But one of the things is that when you look at all the work that you have, one of the things that is very clever is if you can delegate anything to anyone that is capable or is able to do the work. So I guess that's the first thing that you would look at.
And we're going to talk more about these in more detail
That's
as we
right.
go through. Um, but some of these things are just really a summary. Strategic offloading sounds
That's
great, doesn't
right.
it? I
That's
mean, what
right.
a term. Create a more efficient and resilient team. And we will talk about that uh, because that will happen. What can be delegated? Margaret will talk through that. A
Yep.
bandwidth check. You know, are we being honest? And quite
Mm,
often, as project managers, not entirely.
mm.
Stretching the team. Again, this is like using this to our advantage and identifying the right person for the job. Mm. Okay, Margaret, over to you.
So I thought about this question and I thought the best thing, I mean, often when I've had like a lot of things on my plate, is you look at the priority and you look at how to prioritize your work. And that would be
Yeah.
the first thing, and to see what's urgent and what's important. And then I guess we can go through all of the slides from there. But I mean, that would be the first thing that I would do. So we can go on to the next slide.
Okay, sure. Oops, hold on one sec. And I'm keen to know too from Lilia and Frederick if this is something that's resonating with you as we go through. So don't be afraid to put your hand up or send
Yeah.
us some emojis.
So
Okay.
So yeah, the first thing I would do is, if I've got something that's really urgent or something that's very important that needs to be done really quickly, I would understand if there's a due date, or if it's, for example, a compliance or, regulatory issue or regulatory project. And then I would look to see, and prioritize that in my, to-do list, and have a look to see, whether it is urgent or not. And to do that, there are different ways you can actually, if you understand what that regulatory date is, or if it's really urgent, there's a due date, then I would know that that's, a priority. I would, to be able to find that out as well, is I would speak to the sponsor or the business owner to determine the priority. Or you can actually obtain the dates usually from the charter or the business case, and that's another way of obtaining it. Another
If you've
way,
got one.
if you've got
If
one,
you've
that's
got
right.
them. Mm.
Another thing would be that another way is to speak to your manager to be able to basically determine if there's a priority. And then ways that I've found in doing some prioritization is, if you've got like a long list of priorities or a long list of things that needs to be done, then one way is to basically block into A, B, C, A being high priority, and then within the A's, you would prioritize each item. And so here I've got an example. I've got A1, A2, A3, where you're prioritizing within each of the groups. And so priority A I've got there is urgent, and then B is important but not that urgent, and C, it needs to be done but not right now. And that's how I would kind of, especially if you've got a really long list of things that need to be done. And that's another way of, being able to, collect all of your things in to-dos and be able to then prioritize. Now, I like personally to do it on a paper-based system. And the reason why I do that is because it's actually, it's a pain point. It creates a pain point if I have to then carry over anything that's left over from, and I like to do it by the beginning of the week. So say on a Monday for the whole week. And if there's anything that's not done in that week, then having to rewrite it the following week is a big pain point for me, because it's an
Oh,
effort,
wow.
right?
Yeah.
It's an effort of having
Yeah.
to carry and rewrite something from the previous week into the new week. So, it's much easier if you are putting it in your OneNote, or like
Yeah.
on Excel or on a Word document, where you're
Mm.
writing things down, typing things up, because it's much faster and you don't have to rewrite it. Whereas if you're having to rewrite it, it's an effort.
It's
And
an effort.
hence
Yeah.
and hence the reason why it creates not an urgency, but I guess a way of you having to try and complete that by the end of the week so that it's all done.
Yeah.
And that's the way
And
that
it's
I
also
like
a
to manage
thinking
my work.
process, isn't it? You've got to then go back through every week and think through it again. Were these things reasonable in the first place? Should I carry them forward? Did I finish them in the right way? And and whilst these things sound really simple that we're talking about, one of the key issues in this question is about this person's mental health, I guess. It's, they're trying to manage through something that they're not familiar with, that they've got a lot of pressure, and we all do. This happens to all of us in project management land. And one of the reasons why Margaret and I go back to basics very often in some of these at the start is because so many times in my experience, project managers forget their basics. They forget their project management basics. So we're just going to fly through these a little bit and then we can expand.
So one thing I look at, especially when you get a lot of emails, is I try and implement the 4Ds in emails. And the 4Ds, and that includes workload as well. So the 4Ds are delete. That's the first one, delete. If you've read it, you've seen it, and you don't need to use it anymore. You've absorbed the information and you can get rid of it. And that way you're not rereading it and spending time later revisiting it as well, because that takes time. So that would be the first D. The second D is to delegate, and we touched on that at the beginning, especially if you're able to and you have people in your team that are able to take on the work and actually know how to do the work. And that would be that's the second D. The third D would be to do it yourself. And so I would do that if, for example, the first D and the second D has already been exhausted, then you refer to the third D, which is to do it. And that way it's done. And the fourth D is to defer the item. Now, I would only defer the item if there's a due date or it's not urgent or not important, or there's a dependency on the actual piece of work, and then you would defer it. But also knowing that when you defer something, you're actually having to revisit it. So that takes time in rereading it, relooking at it. And so you're actually redoing 1, 2, and 3 again. You're either having to delete it after you've deferred it, you've either had to delegate it after you've thought about it, or then you decide, after procrastinating, I'm going to have to do it. But then, and then you just do it. So then it's done. And that way, defer. And sometimes if you defer it, sometimes you don't actually have to do anything. And then the item is gone.
Yeah, it's gone. And look, and as we're going through this, we're thinking about our project management techniques and tools, right?
Right.
And to prioritise work is a basic one, not just for project managers, obviously, but for everyone. But for us to prioritise, what priority, which is what you said earlier, it's a key thing in project management. Enables us to time manage, to scope manage, all of those sorts of things. I'm not a procrastinator. Are you, Margaret?
No.
No, not a procrastinator. And it used to always annoy me when I would be on a bid team or I was leading a bid team. And other people leave everything right to the last minute. And that used to just get on my goat. But that's a whole other webinar on that one, Margaret. Now, are you ready for us to move forward on this one?
Yeah, let's move to the next one.
Okay, next one. And this is our favourite, isn't it? Everyone talks about this one.
Yeah. So one of the things that I thought about when, we're trying to delegate or expedite anything is to obviously use the tools that we can. And one of them is artificial intelligence, AI.
Yeah.
And there's so many tools out there, like ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, Gemini, DeepSeek. And sometimes there's AI tools in any website that you've used, or like chat bots where it's trying to facilitate, anything that you request or you ask before it actually goes to a human. And so that way, why not? Especially if you've got mundane tasks to do, I would definitely use, some AI sort of tool to be able to create a template, create a letter, create anything,
Exactly. I think it's interesting that out of 13 slides that we have, we've managed to get to 8 before we've started to talk about any technology to help. I mean, who would have thought, huh?
That's right.
And it is a thing, like if we just go back to the question again, it's sort of a thing in project management where people outside of project management assume that we're just managing schedules and we're doing all of those things. And that's basically a project manager's lot. But we're doing a whole lot of other things besides all of that, aren't we? So to get things to help, and I'll just give you an example on how I now get AI to help. I I get ideas from AI about the presentations and to refine the questions. And sometimes it will say to me, would you like me to do the outline of the presentation? Like this presentation. And we haven't really used it, Margaret, I don't think, but it's a very good starter. I tend to throw a lot of it out, but it's a good starter. So I think what we're saying here is, as project managers, use AI or use other tools that are available to you. And we did talk about this at another webinar about AI and project management. So I'll put that link in the description as well. But I always think that we're lucky as project managers because we got so many tools. We got stuff we can do. We don't have to run around with our, took like with the heads cut off.
That's right. So one of the things that we find in projects is that the work is actually quite a big task. And so what you need to do is actually break it down. And that applies to anything. I mean, if you think about you want to become an author and you want to write a book and you write a book in your to-do list. I mean, that's an enormous task in itself. So by breaking it down and saying, okay, I'm going to do the title page this week, the contents page next week, the first chapter the week after, that will help you to be able to slowly get things done and get things out and completed. Another thing that when I was thinking about this is to actually time box things as well. So sometimes, and this happens to me a lot, I get distracted. So I start something and then I move on to something else and I haven't finished the other thing and then I'm moving on to a third thing and I haven't finished it. So if I time box it in my head and say, okay, within the hour I need to complete this, this and this. And that way any distractions are left to the side and you don't actually look at any other distractions. Otherwise, you're picking up things off the floor, you're putting things into your clothes basket and you start doing things around the house without even thinking, and then suddenly a whole hour is gone and you haven't done the thing that you meant to start at the beginning of the day.
It's pretty challenging. That can be challenging, the hybrid stuff, which we talked about recently as well. But I'm pretty disciplined and probably drive people a bit mad. But even if I'm at home, I'm disciplined. So when I'm in an office, what I tend to do is go to lunch at 11:30. So by the time I'm back, people are all at lunch. So I've got a bit of peace and nobody's talking to me or any of those things. And I've also learnt to say no. And again, we talked about this recently, the professional no. Look, I'll get back to you a bit later, but at the moment I'm just focused on this. So if you wouldn't mind sending me an email about that and following me up. If you're a program director and you've got 6 big projects underneath you with program managers themselves, you're busy. So you really have to have those skills of delegation. You really have to have those skills of organisation, which is what they always say that all project managers are really good at, but they're not necessarily good at organisation. I think
That's
that's really
right.
good what you're saying, Margaret. Reduce the time in content switching. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that? Just expand that one a bit.
Yeah, so the context switching is really to do with having to actually what I just mentioned briefly just now, where say you're writing a report and you start a report and you halfway through or you're 2/3 of the way through the report, you leave it and you move on to something else. Okay, you've context switched. You haven't actually completed the report, but you've actually moved on to another task. Now, what that will do is that when you go back to the report to try and finish it, it takes an average of 20 to 25 minutes for you to actually pick up your thoughts, gather the thread of where you left off and where you're going to finish. So if you're doing that constantly throughout the day, which is why I did mention, say,
Oh,
for example,
yeah.
in point 2, the time
Yeah.
boxing of the emails, where you're constantly, say, writing a report, reading an email, finish it, going back to the report, going back to your emails, you're actually going to lose a lot of time in context switching because you're losing the thread of continuing the thought pattern of completing the report.
Yes.
That's why a lot of people actually put on focus time. They might actually block out an hour and have focus time for them to actually complete something, piece of work, a report or some document or something that they need to complete and not get interrupted so that they can finish it in that hour, for example, before they will then go and context switch into something else. And that's why
Yeah.
I know in the past I have, for example, had 100 emails that I receive in a day. Now, what I do is I'm not actually switching back every minute to try and answer the emails, but I might actually basically time block it so that I'm only reading them in the morning, maybe at lunchtime, and maybe at the end of the day, so that you might cover off 20, 30 emails in one go. And same with the context switching, you're trying to complete pieces of work. So it might be a status report. It might be, trying to finalize some budget numbers and, actual numbers against budget and forecasting. If you're context switching, you're revisiting the thing that you thought of for example, previously, if you hadn't completed it before you actually finish it. So you're actually losing a
Yeah.
lot of time in context switching.
That's a really good point because I never really thought of it in those terms, but you are right, and we've all been told that we need to multitask,
Mm.
um, and multitasking is the thing. And quite often, if you're having trouble, somebody will say, "Oh, just use Confluence, just use this, just use." They're all talking about usually a tool, a software tool, whereas what we're trying to say here is. Um, you use your mind first, use your own skills internally first and your project management tool set, and we're going to start going into the project management tool set in the next slide. And for those Lilia and Frederick online, you'll already probably be thinking about these things. Why don't people think of this stuff? Well, they don't often, even though we know it as project managers. When people get overstressed, they seem to lose stuff. And when you're new to project management, or like our person in the question, um, you know, they're not sure of where they are. So this is where we're talking number 5. Have an honest conversation. Be honest with yourself, but be honest with your manager about your workload. And very often I've found that people, um, they don't have the evidence. So they don't want to go to their manager because they can't really quantify why they've got a problem. So if we think about what that is in project management land, it's your status report. if you're not being honest in your status reporting, then it's going to be very difficult to try and wind that back. So, Margaret, I've just talked a little bit about the first bit, but there's other things that we need to do, to be honest, don't we?
That's right. And I mean, I've been in a situation where I have had so many big projects and a lot of admin, and I haven't had the admin support.
Yeah,
And I found that I haven't been given the admin support, and there's no
right.
way around it but to actually talk to my manager and say, hey, if you can't give me the admin support and I'm doing these projects, you're going to have to offload one of the projects to another project manager. And
Yeah.
although it did seem like, and I did feel a little bit like similar to what that question was asking, was that maybe they think that I can't do the work, but it's not about that. It's more about the
No.
fact that it's so time consuming that then you're not having a good work-life balance.
Well, it's also, and I've done this in the past, I've said,
Mm,
well, wouldn't you be better? Wouldn't we be better in the budget to employ a project coordinator or administrator at
mm,
this cost than me spending 5 or 6 hours a week at my cost, which is much higher? The productivity is a much better proposition. I've often coached project managers in the past and said, instead of going in from a I'm not exactly sure what it is situation, I'm not feeling good, I'm feeling overstressed and overworked,
mm,
employ your project management um, technique and start focusing on what are you delivering? What are the resources that you've got available to deliver? Are those resources being used effectively? And in the past, on big programs, I've got a resource plan. So I have my budget utilisation, and I'm tracking that by cash flow every week. I'm also tracking the schedule, of course, but I'm tracking my resource usage. Now, most project managers don't do that. But if you don't have a good handle on your resources in your project, it's very difficult to go and say, I'm feeling overworked. Because what are they going to say? Oh, why? That'll be the first thing. You've got to have the ammunition. So you may have to let go of some of your workload as well, Margaret, which is what you were sort of alluding to, um, and potentially feeling a little bit like our person, maybe they're seeing me as not capable. But we've got to remove those things. If we have the evidence, we don't need to come to our sponsors with that sort of attitude.
that's right. And, and sometimes, in my case where I did go to my manager to say, listen, if you can't provide me with an admin person to help me with a lot of this,
Yeah,
admin work, I'm going to have to let something go. And it was, in the end, it did, that's what happened. I had to let something go because they
yeah,
weren't willing and able to provide someone who, like an admin person, to assist.
yeah.
And therefore, you know, I had no option because I was working 12, 13-hour days every day. So
Exactly. Well, it's like being ruthless as project managers. We have to, a fundamental thing for a project manager is to absolutely understand your scope. What am I delivering? I should be able to, as a project manager, in one paragraph, give you my scope statement. One paragraph. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. And these are the outcomes. So if that is going to be impacted by a productivity issue, whether it's me or it's somebody else, whatever it is, then that's the evidence. That's the way to go and start talking about these things instead of cap in hand. I'm really not feeling good about all of this stuff, which you
mm,
won't be. You'll be overworked. And there's nothing wrong with saying that as well. I'm feeling, overworked and probably underappreciated. But
mm,
look, sponsor, this is why. This is
mm.
why. This is the evidence that I've got. And say, like you're sort of saying, Margaret, end of the day, we're not going to be able to deliver all of these things. So which thing would you like to drop?
Mm.
Which part of the scope, sponsor, would you like to drop? Zip your mouth up and let them answer you. Because,
Exactly.
I mean, really, we're not in the business of killing people as project managers.
That's right, including ourselves.
Correct. Okay, so here we are at leverage your project management toolset. So people watching should be putting their hands up if they're project managers now going, oh, yeah, oh, that's right. There we go, Lilia. I remember those things. How many times do people not employ their project management techniques and tools? Leverage your PM toolset. Clarify, review and agree roles. Position descriptions or a resource plan. Margaret, you talked a little bit to start with about the charter, project charter. Very, very few times I've gone in, do they even have one?
That's right.
You know,
And
business case maybe,
yeah,
but a charter? No. So what do?
so generally I try, if I have the opportunity to put it into the business case, I will, because that gets signed off by all the
Yeah.
senior people, all the sponsors, all the, heads of. And so I will usually put in the role, the person's name and their title and the role that they're going to have. That way the role and responsibility is signed off.
True.
Now, that has been so valuable because I have been in a position where that has happened, where the roles and responsibilities have been signed off. The person has been appointed and they're happy to do it. But after a few weeks, they don't want to do the work anymore. They're saying, I've got my own, day job and, I'm too busy. And even though they were appointed by the sponsor, they're not willing to do it. And I've gone to them and said, this has been approved. This is your role, and it's been signed off. And what's happened then is that someone else has been appointed in replacement of that person, but that has been detrimental to them because initially they were appointed as the key person for that particular position, and they may have not, and maybe tied to that particular role and responsibility as part of the project, they may not get a big enough bonus, for example.
Yeah, they might have KPIs.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's how it's affected them in the end. So that's why it's important that, the roles and responsibilities are clarified. And if it's not in the business case, I have been in a position where it hasn't been in the business case. It's then in another document after that, subsequent to that, it is actually included, the roles and responsibilities.
Look, this happens not just in project management, and I have coached other people outside of project management land that are overwhelmed. And the very first thing that I ask them to do is to get that evidence. So collect like a very short summary every week, like a status report email, right? And that goes off to your boss, just saying, look, this is what I've actually been doing this week, and I think this is a risk or whatever it is. So project management technique for people that aren't project managers. But if there is no position description, you've got to do something about it. And we do on projects. We have a mix of contractors and permanent resources. And very often the permanent people, they've got a position description, they've got somewhere to go, they've got a HR department or a manager or whoever it is. The contractors don't. So I guess as a project manager, do we have to do something to help those people if it's them that's struggling? Or do we just throw them, like, what do we do? What do we do if we're the project manager?
So, I mean, I would try and see what can be incorporated in their objectives for the year, is that a certain percentage of their role is tied to their performance bonus, for example. In some organisations that has happened. In a lot of organisations, it doesn't happen. But I would try and see, if that can occur, because then there is a wanting for that person to be able to complete the work because it's tied to their objectives.
Yeah.
The other thing I would do is I would definitely put it into a roles and responsibilities document. And if not that, then the RACI, because the RACI
The
is kind of,
RACI. Yes.
yes.
Our favourite, Margaret.
Yes, that's right.
The
Because
RACI.
the RACI,
Yep.
which is basically responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed, actually
Yeah.
says, for each person and each role, whether they are accountable, whether they're responsible, whether they're consulted in something or informed. And it's a summarized version really of the roles and responsibilities, although it'd be good to have both.
And
I
look, it
have been in,
doesn't matter if you haven't got it. If it's nice to have the RACI at the start, but if you don't have it at the start, start it. Go through that
exactly.
process of sitting down with people. It's never too late almost to have a RACI.
That's right.
My book.
And that's right. And I have been in a situation where, people go in and they're wanting to do your job, for example.
Yes.
Or people think that it's your job, like the project manager's job, but it's really their job. And so without having it documented in a RACI or roles and responsibilities, it's that kind of really clarifies the situation, because then you can't be blamed for something that you knew was supposed to be your role or your responsibility or your accountability and not someone else's. And you can't also be blamed for something that was their responsibility and it's not really your responsibility.
Because a lot of this stuff is circular. When we come to problems quite often, it's circular. And part of, I think, a really effective project manager's role is to break that circular, movement and say, well, hang on, what does this actually mean? Let's re-clarify it. Let's review it. Let's agree it. Let's put in place something, whether it's a RACI or a governance structure or whatever it is. And we've got here design and agree governance structures, setting some boundaries. And that the RACI does that really, really well. And you may have to have some hard conversations. I mean, going back to the question, there's some hard conversations for that person to get themselves out of this mire of where they are, being fully burdened by two jobs. It does take someone to step up. So hopefully we're giving people some real practical tools. Status reporting is my favourite. It's got to be honest. If the project's red, please don't make it amber or green, worse. Please don't do that. I'm going to do a session actually for sponsors in how to properly read a status report. So watch out, project managers, because we're on to you. You can find out so much in status reports if you're watching. And then we've got agree communication strategy and frequency of reporting, Margaret, risk management and project charter review. Can you just talk a little bit more about those?
Sure. So, I mean, the comms strategy, it's always important to understand the frequency of reporting, whether you're going to have steering committee meetings monthly, and so you're providing a steering committee pack for the steering committee, whether you're doing dashboard reporting every week, so you're providing the team with a status report or the sponsor with a status report. And the communication might be that you have a weekly meeting that you basically to have the team together and decide, the status, review risks and issues and blockers, and anything else that's, at top of mind for people. So, yeah, definitely.
Look,
I would.
Yeah, it's super important to do those sorts of things because I think it's not just that we do these documents, it's that we get them agreed. That's the real power in the use of project management tools. It's not that we're just writing things in a vacuum or we're putting things, like I said, into Confluence or into our schedule. we're proactively reporting and saying, hey, this is what's coming up. Hey, this is a priority one. Hey, this is a priority two, but I don't have the resources. Looking
Mm.
forward in 3 months, I'm not going to have those resources. So which thing would you like to drop off? Or can we, morph um, the tool set, the budget into looking at the budget and where we can get more space. Look, I'm just going back, Margaret, just for a second, because we're almost out of time. We've got one more slide to go. But just going back to the question, okay? Um, so as I said, I'm pretty sure that this person is a finance person. I can't be absolutely sure of that. But we just want to make sure that we've addressed their questions. I'm closing out 2 jobs. Now, they don't call them projects. I'm closing
Mm.
out 2 jobs. But these are specifically this person's talking about, I don't know how to do this project. Things are moving so fast. Now, we need to somehow slow down the speed, don't we? Like as project manager, this is what this question's about, because otherwise we're likely to have chaos, which we also talked about recently. So how are we going to stop the chaos and how are we going to slow things down?
So sometimes people have said, oh, this is urgent. I want this now. I want this
Yep.
done. And there's no like rhyme or reason why, certain things might be the case. It might be because someone's just, the squeaker wheels, speaks or gets the work done or speaks the
Yes.
loudest. So it's
Yeah.
not actually, true or relevant for what they're saying. They're just, jumping up and down wanting something done, but there may not be any basis behind it, which is why I was saying you got to really look at the priority and see how realistic is it. Is it
Yep.
because it's regulatory or there's a new product that's being launched, for example? I have been in a situation where there was 13 days to product launch and the technology wasn't even updated. I flew to Taiwan to sort this project out. The project manager had a day job and they were doing the project management at the end of the day. So there was not
Right.
sufficient resources applied to a particular project to have a particular product ready for launch date. So there was a date. There was an absolute, due date. They had media. They had everyone coming in on the launch date, and technology was still being developed. So when
Yep.
I went on to Taiwan to have this product and technology, ready, I was on the case. I was going up to the person face to face and saying, when are you going to do it? You said that yesterday. How about,
Mm.
delivering?
Yeah.
So I was on the case and making sure that things were getting done
Yep.
because I knew that the due date was looming and we couldn't afford to delay anything more. So
Mm.
I was chasing people physically, face to face, getting in front of them, making sure that,
Yeah.
the things were getting done. So that's why it's important that you understand if there is a due date, you know, is it valid? Is it true? Is it real?
Exactly. And keep monitoring and communicating
Mm,
that. There's probably, I mean, I've been on big projects before where there's just no way we're going to meet the deadline. It's
mm,
a big integration project and we've got a number of vendors involved. And the hard decision has to come that the vendor is not going to deliver for
mm,
whatever reason. And I've actually been on a project where we had a moratorium. So that was the start of the legal action that,
mm,
okay, we're now stopping. They're already not getting paid, but we're now going to take a moratorium. And I think it was a couple of months to take time out, and we basically had to redesign the project, recraft the plan, relook at the budget. Can you imagine how much money was lost
mm,
from all of that? But on that project, it wasn't so much about missing deadlines. It was more about people running around not really fully understanding what their responsibilities were, and talking in circles, a lot of fast talk, but not action. And when we're a project manager, if we're trying to deal with a sponsor or somebody who's not giving us answers, then we need to do something about it. We've got another video around that. So reach out to us if there's something that you need to be able to implement to do that. But we have to slow people down. And I find that I talk quite slowly anyway, so I'll slow my words down and say, well, let's just clarify that. Let's just go over that. I can tell you it will aggravate people sometimes because I'm deliberately slow. But you got to hold your own because, your job as project manager is to deliver to a scope and a budget and a schedule. So it has to be really clear. So just before we go to the last slide, again, if you're following us on the YouTube channel on this video, please subscribe. We love doing these videos, the Ask the Mentors, and we'd love to have you subscribe. If there's something else that you'd like us to talk about in the Ask the Mentor, please send me an email. And as you can see, it's anonymous, so we do try and respond to them. Okay, the long-term payoff beyond the grind, overcoming the hurdles. Okay, that's what we've got to get to, isn't it?
That's right.
Look, the control, you can't do everything, can you?
No, that's right.
You can't be a control freak. Trusting your team and letting go. We alluded to delegation before, and we didn't talk too much about it until now. But to be able to delegate is an absolute strength. And to be able to delegate to people's strengths, to build your team, to improve people's outcomes and their experience is a fantastic thing. So again, I'm talking about my resource plan, a thing that really doesn't get done much in project land. But at the start, I think, well, who have I got and what skills do I need and who's going to report to who? And I usually work with either their managers or the HR team to say, what can I do as a program director to enhance that person's performance indicators? How can we help them grow together? And you would be amazed at the additional performance you will get out of people because not only do they have skin in the game, but you're doing it for them. And that I find the most satisfying part of project management is to see people grow. So managing pushback, Margaret, can be difficult. We talked a little bit about this too recently, didn't we? Aggressive people.
That's right. And I mean, sometimes the pushback isn't because they don't want to do the work. Maybe they don't know how to do the work.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I would try and find out why they're pushing back. It could be that they're lazy or they're procrastinating.
True. Yep. And the feedback loop, how to provide constructive criticism and support without micromanaging. Look, these are buzzwords that we've all heard, but to actually employ them and to do them as a project manager, I think we have fantastic tools because you can say to a software developer, for example, well, these were the deliverables and the work packets that you were delivering. So where have you got to on those? It's really, really clear to be able to know where that criticism might lie or how you can deliver it. And that's not micromanaging. That's being a project manager. But on the other side of that, a lot of sponsors micromanage, in my experience.
That's right. And they feel, I think from that is they don't understand the role of the project manager, what the project manager is meant to do.
Yeah.
Because it's actually almost like a separate business unit or a different organization that's running the project, separate to a BAU business unit that could be in IT or could be as part of the business unit. The project organization is an organization or a business unit within itself.
Good point, actually, because That sort of leads to not everybody can do projects, not everyone
Mm.
can manage projects. Not all project managers can be line managers. I can't. Well, if I'm not doing projects, I'm running my own company. That's a different story. But not all project managers have those skills to be line managers. So it's something that we need to take into consideration as project managers. And so when we're talking to our managers or our stakeholders about us being overworked, it's just a consideration of how will they view me as a resource? How do
Mm.
they view their team? What support does their team get? Because I don't get that, maybe, you know. So it's just something else to keep in mind. Reclaiming your time, play more golf. This is my message to people. Play more golf, reflect, take time, focus on high impact strategic work that only you can do. I know it's not about that, Margaret. It's not about playing more golf. Can you explain that one for us?
Yeah, I mean, if you're the project manager, and as I gave the example in terms of doing doing administration and trying to get an administrator to help me with some of the
Yeah.
invoices and payments and things like that. That was so many that were coming through, and I was spending so much time just trying to get the payments done for vendors and things like that. I mean, that's you should be looking at trying to delegate that work to a more
Mm.
junior person and focusing on more, the relationship building, talking to the sponsor, talking to the business
Yeah.
owner, you
True.
know, and
Yeah.
that's really what your role is more.
The good stuff. Having the
Yeah, the
cups of
good
tea,
stuff.
the coffee.
Yeah,
I'm having tea today. Sorry, everyone, because my voice is shocking. So excuse my voice. But yes, reclaiming your time, and that really is looking again at what your role is, and advocating for your role and advocating for the role of your team members and say, well, so many times I've thought my role as a project manager is to stand in front of people and go, you're not coming in here to my project, not taking my resources. I mean, that's sort of a metaphor, but if everybody on your project team understands what their role and responsibility is, they will push back if somebody comes in the sideways. And it happens all the time that someone comes in sideways and starts tasking your people, and then you think, I thought that we're going to get that done. Well, no. The PM's paradox: working less, achieving more, and burning out never again. Never doing that again. How many times have we all burnt out and burn out again?
that's right.
Mm, we do, don't we?
That's right.
Because stuff gets in the road.
That's right.
Other stuff, home stuff.
So one way
Yeah.
to combat that is the 4Ds, which is what I mentioned earlier
Yep.
today, because you're not revisiting stuff that you've already read, already looked at or dealt with.
Let's just go back to them quickly because we've got
Yeah.
just a couple of, well, we're pretty much over time, but just really quickly, Margaret, the 4Ds before we finish. Here they are. Oh, no, that's not them. Sorry.
Yeah. So
Oh,
the four
gosh. Yep.
Ds
There you go.
are, yeah. So delete. So if you don't need it anymore, don't just get rid of it. So you're not
Yep.
revisiting it anymore. You're delegating if it's possible. You're doing it so that it's done and you don't have to look at it
Yep.
again. And if you do need to defer. But
Defer.
once you defer, you probably have to go back and do the other 3Ds, either delete, do, or, delegate.
Exactly. Exactly. Oops. Now, anyone online got any questions for us before we sign off?
No, I'm good, thank you. Very,
Excellent.
very great. Great show.
Oh, good. Excellent. Thank you very much. Sorry,
Same
Lilia.
from me. Same for me, but it was very informative. I think what resonated with me both most, very straightforward, but I never thought of it, is email time blocking. I just
Yeah.
never thought like you
Yeah.
can actually time like a
Yeah.
specific time. I would answer
Yeah.
emails like as soon as I get them because I think it's a
Yeah.
habit of mine as well. When I receive
True.
something, I have to respond straight away. So that's what was a very good thing for me. Thank you for sharing that, Margaret.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's excellent. It often is the really logical, simple things that will save us, that once we get into that environment, it all just goes out the window, which is not so good.
Yeah, and Leah, especially if you're in the middle of a report, and this has happened to me, and you just forget and you just go back and you're answering people's emails, and then suddenly you're spending half an hour answering an email, and then you've got to go back to the report, but you've got a meeting now coming up. So then you're actually not actually going back to the report until later in the day, and then to get back into the mindset and the thread of where you're at, you've got to revisit what you've written in the report to be able to see what's missing or what you need to do, and you lose another 20 minutes, and it's a 20 to 25 minutes that you lose in context switching. So that's why it's really good to time box things, especially if you're getting a lot of emails, for example.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic thing.
Yeah, and I've been in a situation where I have had 100 emails coming through in a day, and about 10 of those emails are responses to the thread above. So someone will say, okay, thanks, and then someone else will say,
True.
Oh, can you do this? And then it's actually like 10 emails. So if you're responding in between, sometimes you're actually taking up more of your time than necessary, and you may basically only need to respond to the whole 10 emails by one line or a thread or one response.
Yeah.
And so, and that kind of kills all that time.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is one of the key takeaways for me too, is that productivity loss by not doing the time boxing. But again, we talked about the project management toolset and your technique, and we talked RACI, which we love. We talked status reports, talked about getting the evidence, resource planning or pipeline, all of those things. But communicate. Get your evidence before you communicate, and establish where you're at, what the ground rules are. Reach out for help if you need help. Here at the Project Manager Clinic, we've got coaching specifically for project managers that are having difficulty or there's a problem in their project. We're often very much alone when we're a project manager. So there's no need, just reach out to us, and I've got some fantastic people like Margaret in my network that are very, very knowledgeable. So, Margaret, was there anything more from you before we close off?
No, I mean, it was a very interesting question, and I had to kind of dig into my thoughts and be able to respond to that. And I wasn't sure whether, like you said, the jobs were tasks or whether they were projects. And so I answered based on tasks, and also based on if you had multiple projects where you can't actually, you're overworked and you can't actually get the resources that you need. So hopefully that's answered that person's question.
I think so. So hopefully we'll have something else. Well, we'll have something else fantastic for next month. And I think the question I've got currently is around governance. Margaret, which bit do I do as the project manager, and what does the change manager do? I mean, that's interesting. That's going to be an interesting one. So stay tuned for that. Again, subscribe to the channel and have a fantastic project day. Bye for now.
Thanks a lot, and thanks, Margaret.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.